My coworker Adam had convinced me to go out to a bar with him. I think he wanted to get me drunk, but I wasn't going to drink. In 52 years, I had never drank, and I was not going to start now. He seemed to be a bit disappointed at that, but he would just have to get over it. A woman walked by, and Adam made a little snorting noise and said, "They need to be in a mental institution." "What do you mean?" I said, though I thought I knew. "The so-called trannies pretending to be something they're not," Adam said, shaking his head. "How can they even think that they can become something they're not?" I mentally took a deep breath because I wanted to argue logically and calmly. "You believe in the Bible, right?" I said, looking directly at him. "Of course, and the Bible says that men are men and women are women," Adam said with a smug look. "So, you believe that Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt, right?" I said, leaning in slightly. "Of course, but that was because God turned her into a pillar of salt for not following his commands," Adam said, shaking his head a bit. "Well, other gods could also transform someone, and it would be far easier to change their sex than it would be to turn them into a pillar of salt," I said, shaking my hand a little bit for emphasis. "There are no other gods," Adam said, anger creeping into his voice. "According to the Bible there are," I said, leaning back. "You have the whole 'let us create man in our image' at the beginning of Genesis." I held up a hand to stall Adam's retort and said, "I know what you're going to say, that it just refers to God in his role as the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But then that contradicts God sending his only begotten Son to atone for our sins. But that's not the only place where the Bible says there are other gods. One of the commandments is, and I quote, 'Thou shalt have no other gods before me, for I am a jealous God.' Why would a God be jealous of other gods if there were no other gods?" Adam looked at me like I had grown 3 more heads. Eventually he said, "You can't be serious. I know it's hard to wrap your mind around," I said with a little sigh. "I'm not trying to really convince you right now, but I would like it if you would just think it over. Also think over what you would do if you suddenly woke up tomorrow and you were a woman with no memory of this life, or just tiny little fragments of memory, and you knew that you were not supposed to be a woman. What would you do? Are you telling me that trannies have memories of being the opposite sex?" Adam said, looking incredulous. I nodded and said, "From my own experience, yes. You own experience?" Adam said, looking at me in mild disgust. "I've never really told anyone this, but a long time ago, a couple of memories came through," I said, looking into my soda. "The first one, I was about 6 or 7 and at the beach. I was wearing a one-piece swimsuit and trying to build a sandcastle with a boy. The other one is one where I was about 11 or 12 and walking down a street. That one is a little clearer as I could feel my budding breasts, my skirt swishing over my legs as I walked, the slight tug of my earrings as I walked or moved my head, and the feel of my long hair tickling my neck. How do you know those are actual memories and not ones implanted by Satan?" Adam said, leaning forward. "How do any of us know that our memories are actual memories?" I said with a sigh. "All we have to go on is the feeling of the memory. Does it feel off somehow? Do other people's memories of the same event differ significantly? I can tell you that those 2 memories I have feel more real than memories I have of this life around that same time." "Then, if you're a tranny, why aren't you trying to, quote, transition?" Adam said, putting up finger quotes around transition. "Mostly it's the money involved," I said with a heavy sigh. "Also, while it might make me happier, I don't know how happy I could be. With medical science right now, it just wouldn't be the same as being born a girl, which just makes it more frustrating. I know I'm supposed to be a girl, but I'm stuck with a male body, which I could alter, but it just wouldn't be the same. Consider yourself lucky that you don't have to go through this turmoil." "Well, I think I'll call it a night," Adam said, getting up. "I'll see you at work in a couple of days." With that, he left, and I hoped he would think about what I had said. When I got home, I decided to check my email before going to bed. One stood out to me with the subject line of "Your life is a lie." Curious to see what it was, I opened it, even though I knew I could get a virus. It said that if I was seeing it then, my life was a lie, that I could burn away the lie with a little magic. It gave me the words to say and what I would need for it to work. I looked up to see if there were any mystic stores around, and I found one that looked like it could have what I needed, and it had just opened a couple of weeks ago in my town. I printed out what I would need, and then went to bed. The next day, I stood outside the mystic store, wondering if this was real or a prank. Could they have sent me the email to drum up some business? That was a possibility, but with the memories that I had to take a chance that it was real. Besides, I would only be out a few bucks. Okay, maybe more than a few, but I would have a nice candle, and it would help the business. Once I was inside, a young woman who appeared to be 20 came out of a back room and said, "Hi there, I'm Mary. Is there anything I can help you with?" "Yes," I said, taking out the list. I need this stuff for a spell I plan on doing. Mary looked the list over and said, So you think your life is a lie? How do you know? I said with some suspicion. I recognize the items you need from when I performed the same spell 20 years ago, Mary said with a smile. But you're 20, so how could you perform that spell when you were a baby? I said, cocking my head to the side. That's the thing about this spell, Mary said, disappearing behind the counter. When you perform it, you revert back to what you were when the original spell was performed that made your life a lie. She came up with a tan candle, silver candle holder, a small silver tray, a quill, a bottle of ink, and a piece of parchment. In my case, I was a baby when it had been performed. She continued looking at me. So for 20 years, I was raised as a blonde hair, blue eye, cute little girl. Then when I turned 20, the first time I found out it was a lie, and I performed the spell. There's also another part of the spell I should tell you about. It doesn't reverse time, but it will put you back in the same place you were. So I found myself in a hospital that had been shut down. Luckily, a girl and her boyfriend found me. Also, luckily, the bassinet I had been in was still there and in the same position. If it hadn't have been there, I would have fallen to the floor and died. No one knows where they'll be when their false life is burned away. You could have been in an airplane and you'll appear in mid-air, plummeting to your death. You could appear in a room that has collapsed, in which case you will literally fuse with an object that would cross your space. It's a risky spell, so you have to be sure you want to perform it and understand that it could cost you your life, not just the false one you believe you have. Thanks for the warning, I said with a slight nod. I'm willing to risk it though. If you're sure, that will be $50, Mary said, extending her hand. That was a bit less than I thought it would have been, so I handed the money over. Once she had put the items in a bag, she said, There's a couple more things you should know. When your false life burns away, no one will remember you, and nothing you have done will have happened. You won't even have bought these items. The other thing is that you will remember this false life, but you might not remember your true life if you have lived your false life for more years than your true life. Of course, this isn't much of a problem for very young children or babies, but it can be if you're older. Just be aware of that. Thanks, I said, grabbing the bag with a smile. I turned around and walked out. Mary didn't say to come again, because I probably wouldn't be coming here again unless I ended up in the same city, and she wouldn't remember me anyway. When I got home, I went about setting up the objects according to the instructions. With a shaky hand, I lit the candle with a match, and then wrote my full name, as it appears on my birth certificate, on the parchment with the quill and ink. Fortunately, the instructions didn't say it had to be real neat, though I took my time writing it. With that done, I folded the parchment and held it near the flame. With a deep breath, I began saying the words for the spell. This life is a lie. I touched the parchment to the flame. Burn it all away. I moved the burning parchment over to the small silver tray. Returned to my true life. I placed the burning parchment on the small silver tray and let me stay. As soon as I finished the last word, a fireball erupted from the tray and the parchment was completely incinerated. Then fires just started popping up all over my apartment and on me. Of course, I tried to put the fire on me out, but it was no use. It surged over my body. I could feel some pain, of course, but I was in too much of a shock to feel much of it. Mary had forgotten to mention this, but it made sense that everything in this life was burning. Soon all I could see was flames, and I really couldn't feel anything. The flames suddenly disappeared, and I could feel my body again. What I saw was a woman staring at me carrying some silverware. Her mouth was opened in surprise, and I could feel that mine was as well. I looked down at my body and saw that I was indeed a girl. I was wearing a short skirt with a colourful geometric design. I had on a top, I don't know what kind of top it was, with the same type of design. There was a gold bracelet with some sort of pink stone in it on my wrist. There were pink jelly sandals on my feet, and I could feel big hoop earrings in my ears as I moved my head. My stomach was protruding out a little bit, and then I felt something like popcorn popping in my stomach. Or maybe I should say my womb. The woman looked at me with a growing look of recognition on her face. Jen? She said slowly. Is that really you? I'm sorry, but I don't know who Jen is, I said, looking back up at her. Jen, it's me. Barb, the woman said, gesturing to herself. Don't you remember me? I'm sorry, but I really don't have any memory of this life, I said with a huge sigh. Where have you been the past 36 years, and why do you still look like you're 16 and pregnant? Barb said, a look of confusion in her eyes. Okay, no wonder I don't remember this life, I said, reaching a hand down and rubbing my belly. I don't know if you'll believe me, but you might, seeing as how I just appeared right in front of you. I was transformed into a boy and lived as a male for 36 years. I just found a spell to burn that false life away yesterday. I just performed it, and now I'm here. I was told that I might not remember my true life if I lived more years in my false life. Seeing as how you say I'm 16 and that was 36 years ago, I definitely lived more years in my false life. So you seem to know me. What can you tell me about myself? Like you said, you just appeared right in front of me, so what you say makes some sense, Barb said, taking a deep breath. Your name is Jennifer Ashley, and you knew me as Barbara Clayton, though now I'm Barbara King. We were best friends, and I can't believe I completely forgot about you until you popped up here. If I remember correctly, you were about 5 months pregnant after Billy Batts raped you. He just recently died of pneumonia last month. He never went to prison for raping you, though. I didn't even remember him raping you until just now. But wait, I do remember him going to prison for raping you. How is that possible? I guess he found someone to create a false life for me, and that overwrote everyone's memories, I said, thinking a bit. So he actually did go to prison, but then didn't, because he never raped me in the created life. I looked at Barb, with both hands on my stomach in a protective way, and said, please tell me, did I ever say anything about getting an abortion? Oh, you were absolutely against it, even though there were a lot of people telling you that you should have an abortion, Barb said, looking a bit uncomfortable. I breathed a sigh of relief and said, it's good to know that I was against it. No reason to kill my baby just because they're the product of a rape. What about my parents? They died in a car crash a few years ago, Barb said, looking sad. This was your house, and the crash happened right out in the street. I bought the house just a few days after, even though I didn't remember that this was your house. Oh, and my daughter is in your old room. How old is your daughter? I said with some curiosity. I couldn't really feel the sadness that I should have felt for the death of my real parents since I didn't remember them. Barb smiled a bit and said, she's 16. And yes, I wasn't far behind you in the pregnancy department. At least Michael stepped up when he found out I was pregnant with his child. Well, that's great to hear, I said with a huge smile. Just then the front door opened, and a shaken black man walked in supported by a girl who looked to be about 18. You and Mum never mentioned this, Jen, before Dad, she said, her voice full of concern. Why are you mentioning her now, and why did it shake you up so much? I just remembered her, the man, who had to be Michael said. He then saw me, and said looked to be on the verge of passing out. With a shaky voice he said, Jen. Barb thrust the silverware into my hand and went over to Michael saying, it's her. I know it seems impossible that it is, especially since she's still 16 and pregnant and we didn't remember her for the past 36 years. But it is her. She doesn't remember us though. Looking at Michael made me think about the boy in my memory. I looked at him and said, well, I may have one memory. Did we attempt to build a sandcastle when we were about 6? Yes, Michael said, looking even more shaken than before. Megan, I'll help your father to sit down, Barb said with a bit of authority. Please help Jen finish setting the table and show her where the plates and silverware are. She is eating with us tonight, and I hope for several nights to come. All right, Mum, Megan said with a skeptical look. Once we had the silverware placed for the 3-place settings at the table, she took me to the kitchen and said, I've never seen my dad so shaken up like that. What's going on? It's a long story, and rather than telling you and then repeating it to your dad, I'll wait until I can tell you both at the same time, I said as I took out a plate for me. I told them what I had told Barb over dinner, and I learned that Michael had always thought of me as a sister, though now he was a bit conflicted as we had a huge age gap between us. I heard him mutter something about having to see me as a potential daughter now instead. Barb said that she would be booking me an appointment with an obgyn first thing in the morning so we can make sure my baby was healthy. Considering that I was feeling the popcorn popping sensation, I figured my baby was pretty healthy, but I knew I needed to see a doctor. After dinner, Barb and Michael filled me in on my life as much as they could, and then it was time for bed. I would be sleeping in Megan's room, my old room, and Megan loaned me some sleepwear. She rolled out a sleeping bag and said, You can have the bed. I'll sleep on the floor. But it's your bed, I said as I pulled on the nightshirt. I can sleep on the floor. No, Megan almost shouted. She took a deep breath and said, You're the one that's pregnant. You're the one that needs to be as comfortable as possible. I've heard older sisters of some of my friends saying that it's difficult for them to breathe when they're pregnant. They need to lay on their side when they sleep so the baby gets enough oxygen. It's far more comfortable sleeping on your side in a bed than it is on the floor. Oh, and they also say to put a pillow between your legs to be more comfortable. Well, if you're sure, I said slowly. I'm sure, Megan said with a nod. My parents didn't raise me to be selfish. If I even thought about not giving you the bed, they would have told me that I could be in the same position one day. Though it seems a little doubtful that I would be in your position one day. I just hope you never are, I said, sitting down on the bed. It was a nightmare, knowing that I was a girl, but being trapped in a male body. I put my hands on my belly and said, I just hope that my baby is all right. I don't know what happened to them in the intervening years. That has to be rough on you, Megan said, her eyes full of sympathy. I can't imagine what it's like to know that you were changed into a boy while you were pregnant, and then to change back and be pregnant again. You must have so many mixed feelings. I do, but I have to remind myself to take things one step at a time, I said, taking a deep breath. If I don't, then I may just end up going crazy. That wouldn't be good for my baby. I don't want to add anything else, but how are you going to explain what happened to others? Megan said, sliding into the sleeping bag. I don't know, I said as I laid down myself and put a pillow between my legs. I doubt anyone else will believe the truth. Well, Mum will probably figure something out, Megan said, shutting off her light with her phone. Good night, Jen. Good night, Megan, I said, drifting off to sleep almost immediately. The next day, Barb was able to get me in to see her ob-gyn due to a cancellation. Dr. Oberg was really nice and made sure that the appointment was as comfortable for me as possible. After everything, Barb and I were sitting in her office as she looked at a few charts. Finally, she said, Well, Jennifer, from everything I've seen, it looks like your baby is healthy. The NIPT test should tell us of any potential genetic issues, though, plus confirm that you're having a girl. Those results should be ready by the new year. Now I've known Barbara for some time, having taken her on when my mother retired. What she told me sounds incredible, but I know she wouldn't lie about something like this. However, not many people will believe that, so I have to have as much scientific information as possible. That's where the NIPT test and the cheek swab we did of you come in. From what Barbara told me, this Billy Batts did have a criminal record, and his DINA should be on file still. We can compare the results of the NIPT test to his DINA to determine if your daughter is his child. For your parents, they may have given their DINA to some ancestry sites, or their DINA may have been uploaded to try and find any living relatives after the crash. These two things will take some time, especially if the courts have to become involved, so I wouldn't expect anything for a couple of months at least. In the meantime, do you plan on keeping your daughter? I do, I said, nodding. I know I could give her up for adoption, but I have a support system, so giving her up isn't necessary. All right, Dr. Oberg said, making a note. Do you plan on breastfeeding her then? Yes, I said, nodding. All right, Dr. Oberg said, making another note. So in addition eating balanced meals, I would like you to take prenatal vitamins. These will help to fill in the gaps of your nutritional needs. Now, based on your daughter's growth and what Barbara remembers, you should be in the 21st or 22nd week of pregnancy. If you haven't experienced it yet, you will soon start leaking colostrum from your breasts. This is perfectly natural, and I would recommend you get a couple of nursing bras and pads to deal with it. If anything changes between now and your next appointment, make sure to call us. Of course, if it's an emergency, go to the emergency room. Do you have any questions? I don't think so, I said, trying to think of any question I might have. All right then, I'll see you at your next appointment, Dr. Oberg said, standing up and reaching out to shake my hand. Which I did. Well, now all I can do is wait. Hopefully I'll be able to stay with Barb and Michael and not get tossed into the system. I really like them and Megan. It's a connection to my real life that I'm glad I was lucky enough to stumble upon. I don't know what I would have done if that hadn't happened. Maybe someday I'll find out who transformed me as well, and why. Until then, I'll live this unexpected life.